Welcome to the Explainer. So let's talk about this big summit that just happened, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. You had some of America's biggest rivals, all in one room, looking pretty friendly. So the big question is, what does this actually mean for the future of global power? Is this a new alliance against America? Let's get into it.
I mean, look at this. You've got Xi Jinping from China, Vladimir Putin from Russia, and Narendra Modi from India, all standing shoulder to shoulder. When you see these three leaders together, you know something big is going on. And it's definitely raising a huge question, maybe the question of the moment. Are we watching a new power block take shape right before our eyes? One that's designed to challenge the US.
All right, so let's dig in. What was really going on at this summit? To get a handle on the bigger picture, we've got to look at what each of these leaders was trying to achieve. Because believe me, this was way more than just a photo op.
Each leader came to the table with a very specific game plan. For China's Xi Jinping, it was all about pushing back on what he calls a Cold War mentality, and maybe more importantly, pitching new ways to finance projects that could compete with Western institutions like the World Bank. Then you have Putin. He was there pushing his big idea of a multipolar global order, basically a world where the US isn't the only one calling the shots. And India's Narendra Modi, he was playing a different game. His goal was to signal strategic independence. In other words, he wanted to send a clear message: India is on its own side, and it's going to work with whoever it wants.
Okay, so how did all this show of unity, land back in Washington? Well, to put it mildly, not great. The official response was, let's just say, one of serious alarm.
Yeah, the U.S. Treasury's reaction was about as subtle as a sledgehammer. The Secretary, Scott Bessent, came right out and said it. These are bad actors. He didn't stop there either. He flat out accused both India and China of fueling Russia's war machine with their trade.
And that feeling wasn't just coming from the Treasury. It was pretty much the vibe all across Washington's policy world. You know, some people, like Bessent, tried to play it down, saying, oh, it happens every year, more of the same. But behind the scenes, a lot of insiders were getting really worried about U.S. influence slipping away. You even had folks like Peter Navarro calling Modi getting cozy with Xi and Putin a shame. So the general feeling was pretty clear. This looks like a direct, coordinated challenge to America.
But hold on. That's the official Washington view. There was another, very different American reaction coming into the mix. And yeah, you guessed it, it came from Donald Trump, who had his own unique take on the whole thing. For Trump, this whole situation wasn't really about grand geopolitical strategy. Nope. It was about dollars and cents. He immediately went after the trade angle, hitting India for having the highest tariffs in the world and claiming the whole relationship with the US is just totally one-sided.
So what about the idea of a new military coalition forming? Trump just brushed it right off. His thinking was incredibly straightforward. America's military is just too powerful. He said they would never deploy their military against us. End of story.
And this really lays it all out, doesn't it? You can see this massive split in how America thinks about foreign policy. On one hand, you've got the official DC view, which is all about strategic threats, alliances, and labeling countries bad actors. But then, on the other hand, you have the Trump America First perspective, which is laser-focused on trade deals and pure military strength. We're talking about two totally different ways of seeing the world.
All right, enough about the US reaction for a second, because this story isn't just about how America sees things. What about the other countries? How are they making their own moves in shaping this new global chessboard?
To really get what's happening, you need to understand this one key phrase: strategic autonomy. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. It's just the ability for a country to do what's best for itself, without being locked into one side or another. And honestly, this is the perfect way to describe what India was doing.
And boy, did India put on a masterclass in this balancing act. You see Prime Minister Modi literally riding in a car with Putin and hugging Xi. That's a huge signal to Washington that, hey, we're not your pawn. But then, and this is the brilliant part, at the very same meeting, he's also voicing worries about China's huge Belt and Road infrastructure plan. It's a classic case of playing all sides to come out on top.
Now, for China's Xi and Russia's Putin, their shared goal was crystal clear. The whole point of this summit for them was to push this idea of a multipolar world. And what's that? It's a world with lots of different power centers, not just one. And let's be real, it's all aimed at one thing: knocking the US off its perch as the sole global leader.
So after all this talk, all this strategic maneuvering, what does it all add up to? What does it actually mean for you, for me, for the world? How is the global map of power actually being redrawn right now?
Well, this summit really crystallized a few big things for us. Here are the key takeaways. First, that split in U.S. foreign policy, it's not just a crack, it's a canyon. Second, trade wars are heating up. The U.S. has already slapped some Indian imports with tariffs as high as 50%. Ouch. Third, China and Russia aren't just talking. They are actively trying to build a different system, an alternative to the West. And last but definitely not least, you've got this middle power strategy. Countries like India are figuring out that maybe the smartest move is not to pick a side at all, but to play the field.
Which brings us to a really fascinating final thought. You know, as all these old alliances start to crack and shift, maybe the real power isn't about having the biggest army or the strongest allies. Maybe the new superpower is strategic autonomy, the freedom to not choose a side. In this brand new, messy world we're entering, could that be what true power looks like?